Welcome to the Designing Hollywood podcast in association with the John Campea Show. I am your host, Robert Meyer Burnett. Today's episode is sponsored by the Costumes Rental Corporation. Today's guest is a costume designer and textile artist known for her outstanding work in a variety of productions, from small independent projects to the biggest Hollywood blockbusters. Feature films such as Furious 7, Enchanted, The Conjuring 2, Star Trek Insurrection, and The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo, as well as popular TV shows such as Wandavision, Shameless, and American Horror Story. Her latest works include special textile creations for Helen Mirren as the Greek goddess in Shazam! Fury of the Gods, and the iconic green velvet tunic for Bette Midler as the Sanderson sister in Hocus Pocus 2. And I'm very excited to talk to her about the Steven Soderbergh-produced Divinity, which I haven't seen, but it's right up my alley. Without further ado, it is my great pleasure to welcome costume designer Francine Lecoultre to the Designing Hollywood Show.
Hello. So my name is Francine Lecoultre, and yes, I grew up in Switzerland, and I got involved and passionate with crafts through my family. And at age 6, I started sewing, and I was passionate about sewing, and I said I wanted to be a seamstress, and I was making clothes for my dolls and all this. And then later on, I wanted to be an artist. And my family was involved in the watch business in Switzerland, creating little pieces for watch movements. So at a very early age, I was sitting in the factory and watching, these little pieces getting made. So I was really fascinated by, patience and precision. Definitely, this is my world. So it's how I got interested in craftsmanship. The movie became much later, and at the end I became an educator and a professor of art. So I've been teaching art for a long time, and I only started working in the movie industry at age 43. So I'm a late bloomer, like we can say.
That's amazing. So when you were growing up, were you a fan of cinema? Did you watch a lot of movies? Did you watch a lot of television, or were you more concentrating in the arts itself?
I think none of them, to tell you the truth. We had no television. I had my first television at the age 35. Wow. And I did not grow up with cinema, more like an art neither, actually. So I was an athlete. I was really passionate about sport and athletic, skiing, sailing, and all these.
I mean, in Switzerland, I've been to Switzerland, and it's incredible. I spent a whole holiday season in Davos skiing, so it's the best skiing I've ever experienced was in Switzerland. So that makes a lot of incredible. So how then did you find your way from a career in the arts and being a professor? How did you find your way to Hollywood? How did that happen?
Well, that's definitely an adventure. Being a professor of art, I also had a boyfriend who was a director in theater. So I became passionate of costumes at that time, and I was designing costume for avant-garde theater, which I really liked. And then I created the costume for an opera, for 2 opera, The Magic Flute and Carmen. And then I was definitely hooked. And I took a sabbatical year and, traveled to San Francisco, and then end up being interested in learning really how to make costumes. And I decided to attend the Institute of Fashion Design, and I received a diploma in costume design. And then I became a costume designer like that. So, yes.
But it's amazing to switch. Were you ever switching careers like that? And again, designing for theater, a lot of costume designers in movies began in theater. And what I've always been fascinated by is when you're designing for theater, you're designing for an audience that's sitting far away, and you have to sort of fill a stage, especially if you're designing for opera. There's some, I mean, the Magic Flute must have been an amazing opera to design for. Is there a difference for you when you're designing pieces for theater and opera as opposed to designing pieces for cinema, when you have to be the camera's close up and right on a costume, especially when you're a textile designer? Is there a difference between the two?
There is difference, of course, but I definitely have been like influenced by theater, because theater, everything is big and bold, and the scale is also much bigger. So I still like expressionist costumes and scales and large design and pattern. My specialty, being a textile artist, is painting like special motif or fabric on the fabric, and definitely the theatrical background that I have is a lot of has a lot. Yes.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting to me because the movies that you started to work on were very theatrical. I know that you worked on Joel Schumacher's Batman and Robin, and he came out of production design, and those are very theatrical costumes. And then working on Star Trek and even Tarsem's The Cell. All three of those movies have amazing costume design. I mean, with Batman and Robin, you had Mr. Freeze and, of course, all the villains, and then, of course, Batman and Batgirl and Robin and all of those costumes. And then Star Trek, you had multiple races you were designing for. You had the Sona and the Baku, and the work you started on, you didn't start on anything really easy when you came to Hollywood. They were always big productions that had a lot of very interesting work for you. What was it like for you transitioning from theater to film? Was it difficult? Was it hard for you?
It was, for sure, it was a challenge, not necessarily transitioning from theater to film, but definitely to work in Hollywood, which is a big machine. I started at Star Trek Television, created special fabric for aliens and very special characters, and I definitely was impressed by the speed, by the scale, by all the details and incredible production values that we were producing. So I jumped there and I was really surprised, and I hang on tight. And you have to be definitely patient and persistent, and also humble to learn something completely different. Specifically, my English, was a little bit of a challenge. I did not practice a lot by that time, so everything was to learn, but jumping in something completely new was extraordinary as well.
Yeah, and I mean the so much fun, I think, for a costume designer to work on genre, science fiction, fantasy, horror, action. You got to do a lot of that, and I would imagine, coming from the theater, as opposed to doing, not that historical epics aren't fun, but if you did something set in the 17th or 18th century, your creativity might be limited because you're working on something that's real as opposed to something that you're creating out of your imagination. How do you begin? What is your process when you're tasked with creating a costume? How do you start? Is it with the script? Do you talk with the director? What is your process?
You mentioned, Batman and Robin. Definitely, that was a great also learning experience, because I learned on this project, like starting with samples and, also making a lot of tests and development, like research and development. So like on a film like Divinity, which is a small film, independent movie, I have been able to apply this technique. Even we don't have that much time, I can just use my all my palette of texture or material and reuse them in this process. So it's always like discussion with the director, with Eddie Alcazar. We discussed the possibility and of the costume, and then making tests and making prototype. I really like the development of the prototype, because the prototype has to be right, and after that you have a great costume. So also I think my background in Switzerland, we're all about testing and technology, and the scientific development in Switzerland is very advanced. It's a tiny country, but we have a lot of the quality is extremely important. So growing up with that development, I can apply in everything I do,
Which is great. I'm so impressed by your list of credits, because you worked on some great, as far as costumes, some great films that had great costumes, whether it was The Cell, even the second XXX movie, State of the Union, and Monkey Bone had some great stuff in it that you worked on, and I'm a big fan. So this film Divinity has been a movie that I have been looking forward to. I saw the trailer, and obviously I'm a huge fan of producer Steven Soderbergh, all the way back to his first film, Sex, Lies, and Videotape. And when he gets involved with something, it's always unique. And the trailer for this movie is incredible. And as a lifelong science fiction fan, this film looks amazing to me. And you were the production designer, or the costume designer on the film. How did you find yourself working on Divinity? And what were your first impressions knowing it was going to be black and white and a combination of claymation and live action? There were so many interesting things about this movie. Tell us, how did you find yourself involved with this project, and how did it develop?
So I have to say that we had developed other project together. I worked on a previous movie with Eddie Alcazar, which was The Vandal. And I have been introduced to Eddie Alcazar by the DP, Danny Healy, and who is a good friend. And so on The Vandal was already black and white, and we also had stop motion animation. So we had already a relationship of all the technical aspect, which was actually would make things a lot easier. And Divinity being a film, science fiction as well, then we took on all the different aspects. So this film is very complex for such a small film, but the locations were incredible. The team, we had kind of like already worked together. We went at the Cannes Film Festival with The Vandal, and that was really, really great to continue working and developing.
Well, it's interesting to me how does, obviously, costume design, color is so important in costume design. Knowing that you're making a black and white film, how does your approach change in terms of the clothing that you're designing, not having color to use?
So Eddie Alcazar has a very great vision of, he's very hands-on director, and he has a great vision, and he did not want to use black and white costume, which would be predictable, but more like using warm tones and a palette. Like we were in Joshua Tree in the desert, so you have this desert, but you have this beautiful granite, stone, and so we used this palette for the actors as well. We used nude tone and beige and tan rather than black and white.
Sure,
that would be too harsh and a little boring as well. So the palette was very rich and subtle. And even if you have black and white, you don't need necessarily black and white costumes or fabrics. And we also used a lot of metallic. So the costume of Nikita, I printed the costume with tattoo pattern and metallic. That's my specialty that I developed in all these other films previously. So we loved this metallic accent that was really working very well in the dark, for example. And we actually did a lot of research on that film. We did a test at Panavision with a DP, and we took the time to make a lot of research to find really a good language, a good visual language that was really special and extraordinary.
It looks extraordinary. I mean, it has an incredible, a really incredible look to the film. Now, it's interesting to hear you say, I've always also been interested in how a costume designer interacts with both the production designer and the director of photography to create a palette. And on this film, how did you said you went to Panavision and did tests. When you're working in metallics, because sometimes with different cameras, the way the sensors, if you're shooting digitally or whether you're shooting on film, the way certain fabrics, you can't have too much pattern because there's aliasing. Or what were some of the things that you were looking for in designing these costumes, and how did you work with your DP and your production designer to create an overall look for the movie?
Yes, so we decided to create a visual language and having like maybe shiny material and texture and pattern. And also it was always a lot of testing. So, and I did also a lot of aging. We tested the blood and all that, and making sure that nothing is flat, because there is a lot of movement as well all the time. So it was great that, so definitely with the DP, we tried also the color, and with the production design, the house in Joshua Tree was fantastic. And we worked also with, what was actually very important was the filming of stop motion, because then the set was completely recreated in a studio.
Right.
So then, and the costume as well. So it was a lot of technical aspect, yes.
The difference between, I would assume that there's a scale issue if you're dealing with stop motion and live action. Was it the same, like in terms of the size of costumes? Having not seen the movie, I would assume, was the stop motion smaller, or how did that work? And if you're making clothes for a stop motion character, how does that work in terms of your fabrics? Do you have to find fabrics that you can reduce in size and scale?
You see me laughing here because I love the question. You mentioned, do you find? Well, we don't find. We have to make it.
Right. Yeah, I should. Yes.
So yes. So that was actually that was definitely a big aspect of everything, because the puppets are much smaller. They're really like the size of two hands, let's say, about, and maybe your one hand. I don't have the measurement,
right.
but it's much smaller, and you have to reduce the clothes, make miniature clothing.
Yeah.
And the puppet makers made the puppet and the clothes, but then it was a lot of adjustment. So I always do the adjustment myself, like recreating the nude underwear, because they have to match exactly.
Yeah.
And all the details, the patina, all the matching, because I think only in Hollywood do we understand exact matching. And I have this long practice, and I think that's a very good asset to have, because you see the difference on camera.
Yeah, absolutely. And I would think that in terms of scale, fabric moves differently. I mean, in terms of the thickness of a fabric on a regular sized human being, you have to reduce the thickness of that. So if a stop motion character is moving, it can't, the fabric can't be too thick. So when you're creating something, were you using the same material, or did you have to find a different material that looked the same as it would look on the live action characters, so it would move in a similar fashion? I mean, was that hard to?
Exactly right. You can barely never use the same material, because
Yeah.
the same material would be too heavy, too thick, and look way too bulky in this. And definitely I see, like, I was mentioning earlier to you that I was working with my dolls, when I was 6 years old.
Right.
So I really saw that. I'm just seeing this right now, like making little buttons and little zippers and little, I was fascinated by these hooks and all the mechanism of a costume when I was 6 years old already. And making a doll or making a puppet miniature is the same. So you have to recreate always, and paint the little motif and repaint the pattern of the fabric much smaller. Yes.
I mean, it's that in itself is fascinating to me. And you talked about coming from a family that made precision pieces for watches. And there's a discipline and a philosophy that goes into manufacturing something that's that exact. And I would think with stop motion, when you're reducing something in size, and then you have somebody has to manipulate the stop motion characters. I mean, they have to be moved a frame at a time. Were there any interesting and unique difficulties in addition to the scale issue in terms of when fabric is handled? What were some of maybe the things that you might not have anticipated working in stop motion that were also other difficulties that you might have had to surmount?
Well, maybe what I can see is, because I have been trained at a young age at minuscule little pieces and detail,
Yeah.
I have an eye is used to this. My eye is very, how can I say? I see things that probably other people would not see.
Yes.
When you bring me something, I say no, it does not work. And for somebody else, it would be just okay. So I think definitely I have this patience of creating these very small little details until it's really, really good. Yes.
Yeah, I would think that would be something that you would excel at, and not a lot of people. It's funny because I'd never thought of that before but you have a unique background that would have given you great insight. And I've always loved stop motion all the way back. There was I don't know if he was Russian or Polish, named Vladislav Steryevich, who was making stop motion movies in the teens, 1915, 16, 17. And when I first moved to Los Angeles, I saw a retrospective of his work at the LACMA, the Los Angeles County Museum of Art. And I was blown away by it. And American kids grow up and we've seen stop motion animation, but what you're doing in Divinity, or what Henry Selick was doing in things like Nightmare Before Christmas, when you started working in stop motion, were you going back and looking at previous stop motion films from cinema history? And
Yes.
and what might have been some of the stop motion influences on Divinity? What were some of your favorite stop motion films that you had seen?
Well, I really like to see black and white, like say shades. Also, when you do this, in French we say ombre, théâtre d'ombre, where you see just only the profile or the shape. And definitely I love this invention of movie, like with Les Frères Lumière.
Yes.
And these movies that you would go see when I was young. I still was going to see movies, and it was like in this very old theater, and this magic, and the music was playing, and nothing was really working well all the time. So I watched again a lot of this material at the Academy Museum. Also, they have an incredible presentation of little miniature like
Yes.
Tim Burton, and that's just amazing, actually. And I also like the designing, because I also sketched and designed these puppets. So when you see all these little characters aligned and designed, it's very precise. I love this precision of development for this. Yes.
Now, you talked about growing up and sewing for like your dolls. Do you sew and build your own costumes today, or do you work with people that do that for you?
Well, I have been sewing a lot until I was actually until I became a costume designer. And then, you're running out of time. And
Right,
you just,
right.
also, during your weekend, you might do something else. But on a project, I don't sew. First of all, a costume designer is, we have crews and
Sure.
kind of like specialists that do everything. First of all, I never would have the time, and second, you have a specialist, and it's pretty complicated. Everything is become. So now I can still sew very well, but I don't think I have the skills to sew costumes. A science fiction costume is very
Yeah.
complex, and you need to practice always, actually. So no, the answer is no, I don't sew.
I
And
figured.
I have really great tailors, to do this type of work. Like, for example, the underwear on Divinity for the men were all tailored and complicated. So my tailor, and we need always more, we're on you are filming, and then you have problems, and we need 10 more underwear. So, you need somebody somewhere getting this done. And yes.
How long, obviously stop motion, a low budget movie might film in a couple, 3 or 4 weeks, but stop motion can take a long time. How long was the production schedule of the film? How long did you work on Divinity?
In and out. The filming one was 1 month, and then the prep was short. It was like a month or 3 weeks prep.
Wow, okay.
And then it was a puppet again, with a puppet and organizing. When they were doing the miniature, I was there at the beginning to make sure everything is great. But I think for filming the miniature, I don't know exactly how long it took, but I'm sure it took a long time, because
Yeah.
then that's really very time consuming. So the movie was made definitely in different sections, and that was there was just like definitely a work of passion. Like Eddie Alcazar is very passionate, and it's great working with him, because he, there is everything is organized, and then there is always a space for improvisation. Can we add this detail? Can you put more metallic here and there? And I think we're a great team in that way.
Yeah, I mean, he was the writer director. He's definitely an auteur. He produced the film, one of the producers of the film as well. And when you are working with someone like Eddie, like you said, there's room for improvisation. How do the two of you begin? Obviously he wrote the script, but do you sit down and does he show you things that he's influenced by, that he liked? Do you take drawings to him? How do you begin working with the director?
So on Divinity, for example, it was a very specific start, because it was no script. And mostly it was the storyboarding. So Eddie has a wall with a lot of storyboarding, which was a visual start for each of the characters. And then I continue with sketching and bringing other ideas and research, like, for example, the twin brothers, where Japanese, they were fighters, like martial fighters. So I researched then martial art, in every direction possible. And then for the lab scene also, it was different. And then it was the makeup, the effect makeup, the prosthetic, and the prosthetic, of course, have to work with the costume. So we
Sure.
had a lot of angles to look at for each of these characters. Yes.
It looks this movie. I can't wait to see this movie. I saw the trailer for it like a year ago, and I think it opens in December. And it's one of these films. Like, I grew up watching movies like this, and I'm so excited to see it. And I really enjoy, like, the cast. I mean, I've liked what Bella Thorne's been in, but Stephen Dorff has always been in interesting films. And then, of course, Scott Bakula, another Star Trek connection, the captain of the first Enterprise, the NX-01. When you work with cast members, when you start to work with actors, how does that work for you? Do you like to work with actors? Do they inform some of your choices? What's it like for you working with cast?
Well, working with cast is everything, of course, and we get information. For me, it's very important to meet with the actors and discuss their costume, and also have an idea of in this project, it was a lot of movement, a lot of actions and everything. So it has to be comfortable, what they can wear. And definitely with Stephen Dorff, he was incredible in this role. And he had very few costumes. He had several costumes. He had a costume as a scientist, which was pretty easy. So it's just regular fitting of contemporary clothing. But then it was all this scene as a monster, and where he had the prosthetic growing, and it's pretty uncomfortable to wear these prosthetics,
Right.
And very long hours of makeup. And then it was this underwear, beige underwear. So of course, it's not very exciting to wear a beige underwear for almost all the film. And it's always like, as a costume designer, you want to bring new costume and excitement and be generous, and your actors look fabulous. But it was not the case. And that was, he did great. A great performance, but in the costume department, it was not extraordinary for sure.
But it does look like you did get to create a lot of it. Based on what I've seen from the film, you did create some pretty amazing stuff for the other characters.
So I loved the scene with the woman, with Bella Thorne, because it's extremely simple. I think the variation is really good. And then I love definitely the costume of Nikita. I think she loved her costume. And also we had this athletic men, all these athletic men, basically they don't need that much costume because everything about them is their body, the body built. And so it was great to work with them because they felt they loved their costumes. They wanted to take it home. And and also the women, the contrast between the athlete, which were really extraordinarily built and, beautiful, tall and beautiful, and then we had the women that were models and dancers, and they were very small. So you had already, like, the characters were already there, and the costume was just there to enhance and support them. So
sure.
And when we did party scenes, and we added a lot of detail. So it was so much variation in that film that it was fascinating.
What are some things in the film for viewers? what are some things that you're particularly proud of? What are some of your favorite creations in the film?
I would say, the Nikita and the brothers were kind of a team, kind of a gang. And I really liked the way they were together because they were, first of all, they were also very tight because they stayed a long time together during the whole filming. And I felt like visually between, they looked like warriors and being also beautiful and sexy, so I really liked that. I thought it was very science fiction, minimalist science fiction, beautiful, elegant, and I really like that. Yes.
Well, that's that's all music to my ears. I really, I cannot wait. I cannot wait to see this movie.
You see what was also what you see in the film, but then the filming was, like it was hot. It was Joshua Tree at the end of the summer. It's really warm, so we had all these elements to deal with. So all the cast and crew and everybody was so passionate and so extraordinary on that project. It was really magical.
Yeah, it looks magical. I really can't wait to see it. And I have to give you a shout out because there's other movies and shows that you've worked on that I'm a huge fan of. You worked on Wandavision, which I was blown away by. I loved Wandavision, and I loved Legion, which was another Marvel show based, it came out of the X-Men, but Legion was what a knockout show, and that must have been a pretty fun show for you to work on. I really love that. And I think a movie that doesn't get enough love is Passengers with Chris Pratt and Jennifer Lawrence. The design of that film, Guy Hendricks Dias was the production designer, and I love the costumes that you guys worked on. I love the look, and there was a lot of, like you said, textile work that you had done. Really amazing work in that film. And I loved how Helen Mirren looked in Fury of the Gods. Her costumes were absolutely stunning. So I wanted to give you a shout out to the work on those films that you'd done because big fan of that work. And then I know I would be remiss because of our audience who loves science fiction, fantasy, and horror. And I'm not going to ask you anything about it. I just want to point out that you are working on the Skeleton Crew TV series, the new Star Wars TV series. I'm sure you can't even mention it because Disney will come after you with the Disney police force. I just want to give you a shout out that that's of course the show that Jude Law is starring in, and I don't know anything about it. Don't say anything about it because we'll get demonetized and the police will come after us. But I'm very excited for what you have coming up as well. So very exciting. And then Divinity is apparently opening in December here in the States, and people are going to be able to see it. So it's going to be very exciting. Now, we always ask people on this show, there's going to be a lot of people that are just beginning their career. Is there any advice, what advice would you give to somebody who wants to get in to costume design, textile work? How should they begin? Because you had a very circuitous route to get there. You had so many interesting things before you became a costume designer. What advice could you give somebody who wants to work in costume design?
So I love this question because I've been teaching, as an educator for before in my country, and I also have been teaching costume design at some point, and I love education and passing you skills, and I would definitely recommend to work on as many projects as possible, different projects, but also find other designers to work with and learn from them and be patient and learn very different ways. And I definitely have to give a shout out myself to the extraordinary costume designers that I had the pleasure to work with. You mentioned a few films, and like the last, for example, Hocus Pocus or Shazam 2, the costume for Helen Mirren were a pleasure. I created these beautiful capes with metallic as well and
Amazing.
flowers. And I spent 8 months at Warner Brothers. And you see one cape, but then there is also the behind. You have to make multiples. And for me, Helen Mirren as a Greek goddess is really like maybe my favorite costume. Like women warriors, and I think she's extraordinary in that role, and so many other roles actually. So that's definitely a pleasure. And definitely early in my career, working at Star Trek with Bob Blackman, working with Aiko Ishioka was incredible. She taught me that a costume is a piece that you can see in a museum, and museum quality. Yes, she was always talking about museum quality. So you keep that for the rest of your life. I worked with Sanya Hayes and many costume designers that trusted me, and we had this partnership to create something beautiful, and it's definitely an adventure. And also in television, it's even more challenging because the speed is more difficult than on a movie. So yes, I definitely recommend to all the young designers to be patient first and to learn. It takes a long time to develop yourself and to learn how to do things, and to the crew, and it's a big machine. So yes, that's my advice.
Good advice. Good advice. And again, your credits are, I just look over them, and you worked on so many cool movies, whether it was Mission Impossible 3 or whether it was, you worked on, I'm a huge fan of James Patterson's Alex Cross novels. And you worked on Along Came a Spider with Morgan Freeman, which was the second novel that they adapted for film. And the first one was Kiss the Girls. But I mean, Michael Wincott, I love that movie. I love Along Came a Spider. And I just watched another film that is absolutely stunning, a perfect movie for Halloween, which just passed, was Sleepy Hollow. Tim Burton's Sleepy Hollow was just re-released as a 4K disc, and you can really see those costumes are amazing, and you can really see them in 4K. They really hold up. Your whole team on that movie, amazing. And you also worked on the TV series Counterpart that ended too early. What a great show that was. The J.K. Simmons changing multiple Earths. That was a tremendous show. So your credits are absolutely fantastic, and I can't wait to see Divinity. And for any of you science fiction or horror fans, all you have to do is watch the trailer, and you'll be hooked. You'll be so. I think watching it, you can't help but not. You're going to want to see this movie as soon as you watch the trailer. So I hope. And Eddie Alcazar is somebody that I am very interested in seeing his work and what you guys did together. So listen.
And also, I wanted to also mention it's great to work with young directors as well, because they have a whole different approach with images and like making little. They work so fast, and they're so creative, and it's also in a digital way, like communicating digitally about the film and all that. So it's really fascinating to me to get to this new language and new generation. I love the technical revolution and all this, and this new world that we're creating.
It's good to hear that. I mean, everyone's talking about, well, there's going to be AI and everything's going to change, but I don't think that's necessarily true. It's just yet another tool to use. And to hear someone, a veteran like yourself, who's worked on so many great projects, to be looking forward to working now and today and moving forward into the future is very inspiring. So, and the possibilities are endless. who knows what we're going to see in the next 5 or 10 years. It's going to be amazing. Well, Francine, I want to say thank you so much for being here and letting us interview you today here on the Designing Hollywood podcast. It's been great. It has been very insightful and very interesting. And Divinity, I hope everyone checks it out, seeks it out, because after you watch the trailer, you're going to want to see this movie. So everybody should go watch it now. It's on YouTube. You can see the trailer. You can see your work, and it looks amazing. So thank you so much for being here.
Thank you very much. Thank you. It has been a pleasure, and I like your passion, and definitely your knowledge is incredible. And I really I thank you so much.
Well, thank you. And thank you to our very impressive sponsor, Costumes Rental Corporation. The variety of costumes at Costumes Rental Corporation is expansive. CRC is recognized worldwide as the premier supplier of military and police costume uniform rentals. Costumes Rental Corporation takes pride in its commitment to each customer, helping to produce the type of exceptional look needed for a successful production. A special thank you to founder and executive producer Martika Ibarra, co-founder, costume designer, the legendary Marilyn Vance, and of course, John Campea from the John Campea Show. Our technical director is Taylor Gonzalez. Thank you to all of our viewers for tuning in, and be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel. Tune in to the audio version wherever you listen to podcasts. I am, of course, your host, Robert Meyer Burnett, and you can find me on Instagram at rmburnett, or find me on Twitter at BurnettRM, or on YouTube at PostGeek Singularity. Thanks very much. Like, subscribe, and give us your comments. What would you like to see on the channel? Right down below. Thanks very much for watching, and we'll see you on the next episode of Designing Hollywood.